In medieval England, missing January's planting window could mean watching your family starve while neighbours survived. Officially, we are told to wait until spring, yet ancient calendars insisted seeds like peas and rye must be sown into frozen ground. Let peason be sown betime. What did our ancestors know that modern gardening deliberately hides, and why have these 17 life-or-death crops vanished from spring seed lists? The consequences go far beyond yield. Medieval manorial records and monastic chronicles leave no doubt about the consequences of missing a winter planting window. In the early 14th century, Europe's Great Famine swept across the countryside, killing as much as 10% of the population between 1315 and 1317. Chroniclers at St. Albans Abbey described fields left bare after relentless rains drowned spring crops, while villagers that had sown hardy rye and winter peas in the cold months watched their stores last just long enough to avoid starvation. The difference was not luck. It was timing, and it was written into the agricultural calendars of the time. Walter of Henley's treatise from around 1280 details how reeves and bailiffs oversaw midwinter tasks, including the sowing of oats and peas during January thaws. The instructions were clear: certain seeds must go into the earth while it was still hard and cold. Thomas Tusser, writing in the 16th century, echoed this wisdom with a blunt warning: in January, let peas be sown early. For families who ignored these instructions, the penalty was often hunger. Manorial rolls from Winchester record yields of 8 to 12 bushels per acre for winter rye, sown before the worst of the cold, while neighbouring fields left until spring produced little or nothing at all. The famine years exposed the brutal reality behind these calendars. In 1316, after a second failed harvest, villagers in northern England and the Low Countries resorted to eating acorns and bark. Monastic scribes counted the dead by the dozens, noting that those with surviving autumn sown or winter hardy crops, rye, beans, and leeks, endured, while others perished. That experience became a recorded lesson communities carried forward. These manuscripts survive as more than relics. They are warnings. The medieval world did not wait for spring's promise. It acted in the dead of winter, knowing that every lost week brought hunger closer. The urgency of January planting was not a matter of preference, but of survival, a lesson etched into the very structure of the agricultural year, and one that modern advice has all but erased. Across the Atlantic, a different winter planting tradition took root on the windswept plains of Kansas. In the 1870s, a wave of Mennonite immigrants arrived from southern Russia, carrying with them sacks of Turkey red wheat, seed that had survived generations of harsh winters. Local farmers watched skeptically as these newcomers pressed seeds into cold, unyielding ground long before the spring thaw. Yet, when harvest season came, the results spoke for themselves. Kansas State Agricultural College reported yields at between 25 and 40 bushels per acre for turkey red, sown in late fall and through the winter, while neighbouring fields of spring wheat barely reached 15 to 20 bushels. One archival account describes a Mennonite farmer, name lost to time, who weathered the blizzards of 1875 with nothing but a hope that his winter wheat would endure. When the snows melted, his fields stood green while others lay bare. Bernhard Warkentin, a leading figure in the settlement, told state officials that winter wheat sleeps through the cold and awakens to plenty. That year, turkey red harvests filled granaries and averted hunger, while families who waited for spring planting faced empty bins. The difference came down to biology and timing. Turkey red wheat, bred over centuries to survive deep freezes, required a period of cold dormancy before it could sprout and mature. The freeze-thaw cycles of a Kansas winter acted as a trigger, breaking seed dormancy and priming the plants for explosive growth as soon as daylight lengthened. Fields sown in January or even December emerged from the snow weeks ahead of any spring-planted crop, giving them a head start on moisture, sunlight, and root development. Reports from Kansas State in 1876 credited Turkey Red with transforming the region's food security, noting that its winter planting strategy produced not just higher yields, but more reliable harvests year after year. The lesson was clear in the ledgers and in the soil. Planting before the thaw was not a gamble, but a proven hedge against hunger. The evidence from the plains confirmed what medieval calendars had insisted for centuries: some crops demand to be sown when the world is still locked in ice. Winter's grip, far from being an enemy of the seed, triggers a chain of biological events that modern science now understands as in detail. When certain seeds, such as peas, kale, rye, and garlic, are pressed into cold soil, their cells begin to sense the dropping temperatures. This is not dormancy alone, it is a process known as vernalization. Inside the seed, a shift in plant hormones takes place. Levels of abscisic acid, which keep the seed asleep, begin to fall. At the same time, gibberellins, the hormones that wake a plant, rise as the cold persists. This chemical handshake tells the seed that winter has arrived and that it must wait, but also that it is preparing for the moment when warmth returns. Freeze-thaw cycles are not just a test of survival, they are a form of preparation. Each time the ground heaves and settles, the soil cracks open, letting in air and moisture. For crops like broad beans and leeks, this means better oxygenation and a quicker start when spring comes. Studies from agronomy journals confirm a 15 to 25% boost in germination rates for winter-sown peas and kale compared to seeds started after the last frost. This cold period also interrupts the life cycles of many pests and pathogens. Fungal diseases like damping off, which can wipe out young seedlings in damp spring conditions, are suppressed by winter's chill. In controlled trials, winter planting reduced fungal losses by nearly half, and pest larvae that would otherwise feast on tender roots are often killed off by repeated freezes. The soil itself acts as a natural cold frame, especially when mulched with straw or leaves. This layer insulates the seeds just enough to prevent deep freezing, while still delivering the cold signal that triggers dormancy breaking. Garlic, for example, develops stronger root systems when exposed to 6 to 8 weeks of cold, leading to larger bulbs and longer storage life. Onions and winter lettuce varieties also benefit, with earlier emergence and more vigorous growth. The result is not only a head start in spring, but a kind of insurance policy against the unpredictable swings of early season weather. By harnessing the biology of vernalization and the protective effects of freeze-thaw, winter planting creates crops that are tougher, more resilient, and less dependent on chemical controls. The wisdom behind January sowing is now backed by plant science, and the numbers speak for themselves: higher germination, fewer losses, and stronger harvests, all set in motion by the cold. On a small homestead in Zone 6, 2 beds of garlic went into the ground, one in the frozen days of January, the other at the first blush of spring. By midsummer, the difference was impossible to ignore. The January bed yielded 10 pounds from a 10 square foot patch, while the spring bed managed just 6. The bulbs from the winter planting were fatter, their skins tighter, and their storage life stretched well into the next winter. This is not an isolated experiment. Across dozens of gardens, modern homesteaders have kept field logs and weighed their harvests, comparing winter-sown and spring-sown crops side by side. Peas tell a similar story. In time-lapse records from the Reed homestead, seeds pressed into cold soil in January broke the ground nearly 6 weeks before their March-planted counterparts. By the time most gardeners were just seeing their first blossoms, the winter peas were already heavy with pods. Early harvest means more than just bragging rights. It means food on the table when last year's stores are running low. In a year When late frosts killed off half the spring peas, the winter crop survived, sheltered by mulch and the insulating effect of the soil itself. Yield logs from Rooted World document another edge. Kale sown in midwinter sprouted strong, with 80% of plants surviving deep freezes that wiped out spring seedlings. At Green Willow Homestead, beets started in January grew slower but finished heavier, with roots averaging 15% more mass at harvest. The numbers repeat across crops, onions, leeks, and broad beans, each showing earlier emergence, higher survival, and a measurable boost in yield when planted before the last frost. The data does not come from universities or seed companies, but from families who depend on their gardens to feed themselves. They track every ounce, every week gained because it matters. Their logs tell a clear story. January planting is not a gamble, but a strategy that delivers more food sooner with less risk from pests and disease. The evidence is in the scales, in the weight of the harvest, and in the steady meals that follow through the lean months. For those willing to plant in the cold, the reward is real and repeatable. 17 crops stand between a family and hunger when the calendar turns to January. Each one is chosen for its ability to withstand the frozen ground, harness the cold, and deliver food when nothing else will. The rule is simple. Seeds must be protected with 4 to 6 inches of mulch, straw, leaves, or whatever the land provides, locking in just enough warmth to keep the worst of the freeze at bay, but still allowing the cycles of cold that trigger dormancy breaking. Garlic comes first. German extra hardy, a variety bred before the Civil War, is pressed 2 inches deep, pointy side up. Onions follow. Winter red and Sturon sets are planted 1 inch below the surface. Potatoes are not buried yet, but are chitted indoors, sprouting in trays to be ready for the first thaw. Fava beans, especially Aqua Dulce Claudia, are pushed 2 inches down and covered thick with mulch. Peas, Alaska, and sugar snap go in next, sown 1 to 2 inches deep, their seeds swelling in the cold, ready to leap ahead at the first hint of spring. Lentils, carrots, and beets demand a ½ inch planting. Detroit dark. Red beets and nonce, winter carrots are old names from seed catalogues nearly lost to time. Cabbage, January king, starts indoors, seeds pressed a ½ inch into trays, destined for cold frames or cloches outside. Kale, best as winterbore or rosneck, is sown ½ inch deep, thriving as freezes sweeten its leaves. Spinach, especially Bloomsdale, long-standing benefits from the same treatment. Leeks, autumn giant, are planted 1 inch deep. Turnips and mustard greens are planted at a ½ inch and a ¼ inch, respectively. Lettuce, like winter density, is scattered in succession, a ½ inch down, for a steady harvest as soon as the snow lifts. Broad beans, close kin to favas, are sown 2 inches deep. Chives, the perennial, are pressed just below the surface, ready to return year after year. Seed preservation specialist Carol Depp puts it plainly. Winter hardy garlic like Chestnut Red survives -20 degrees Fahrenheit because centuries of farmers selected for dormancy, not speed. That is the secret written into these varieties. Each was bred for patience, for the ability to sleep through the cold and answer the call of spring before any modern hybrid. The checklist is not just a list of names, it is a blueprint for survival, one that depends on timing, depth, and protection. 4 to 6 inches of mulch is the difference between a rotting seed and a harvest that will last until the next winter. This is the map our ancestors followed, and it is still waiting in every bag of seed and bale of straw. Fingers numb, a gardener kneels in the hard January earth, pulling back a thick mat of straw to reveal the soil beneath. The ground is cold, but not frozen solid. Just right for the first round of planting. Garlic cloves are pressed 2 inches deep, tips pointed skyward, then covered again with mulch. In the next bed, onion sets slip into the earth, followed by a scattering of pea seeds, each one nestled in a shallow trench. The process repeats with fava beans, kale and lettuce, each crop spaced and sown according to old instructions, every move deliberate and quick. This is not just a tradition revived for nostalgia's sake. The timing and sequence are designed to outsmart the feast or famine cycle that haunts so many home gardens. By staggering plantings, garlic and onions in one bed, peas and beans in another, leafy greens under simple cold frames, each crop matures at a different pace. The result is a rolling harvest, not a single burst. Families who follow this pattern, alternating winter and early spring beds, report a steady supply of food over months instead of a glut followed by scarcity. Yield logs from homesteads in zones 5 and 6 show that winter-sown kale and leeks can be harvested weeks before their spring-planted cousins, with survival rates up to 80% through late freezes. But if the method is so effective, why did it vanish from mainstream advice? The answer lies in a quiet shift that swept through rural America after World War II. Extension bulletins from the 1940s and the 1950s, once packed with tips for cold, hardy winter sowing, began to change their tune. As tractors replaced horses and farms scaled up, the calendar moved to fit machines, not plants. Spring became the season of planting, not because it was best for every crop, but because it was easiest for the new machinery. Uniformity and efficiency took priority, and the advice filtered down to home gardeners. Wait for warm soil, plant everything at once, harvest in a rush. This shift is clear in the records. Home Garden Leaflet number 25 from 1952, distributed to millions of households, lays out a spring-centric schedule and warns against early planting. Forgotten are the old instructions for tucking peas and onions into the ground before the thaw. The result is a system built for the convenience of industry, not for the resilience of families. The cost is months of lost harvest and a new dependence on store-bought food when pantries run low. Hands in the soil, the gardener finishes the last row, covers the bed with straw, and marks the date in a battered notebook. This is not just an act of hope. It is a quiet rebellion against a system that forgot what the cold can do. Each seed planted in January is a step toward independence, a hedge against hunger, and a return to a rhythm that once fed entire villages through the hardest months of the year. Today, grocery shelves disguise just how fragile our food supply really is. As unpredictable weather and global disruptions grow more common, reclaiming forgotten planting calendars becomes more than nostalgia, it is resilience. The seeds we choose to plant in January decide whether we inherit dependence or self-sufficiency. In the end, food security is not found in stores, it is sown in the choices we make right now. What would you plant for your future?